I've played an incredible amount of Season 18, and the meta is pretty established, but I want to discuss counter-meta strategies here for you today. But first, let's describe the main meta. There's a few contributing factors. One is Wuyang as a hero. He has a very strong poke attack that he does out of your line of sight. Nothing we've ever seen before. Because of that, if you are a mid-range poke character, you're very easy to get poked down without even the opportunity to fight back. Then on top of that, Wuyang's ultimate allows all-ins to be even better. So the thing that counters Wuyang, going all in on him, also is empowered by his ultimate. On this first clip on Hollywood, me as Wuyang against a Mercy Ana attacking support line is very easy. Even when the enemy gets an advantage, because the map architecture is really in Wuyang's favor, at least on point A here, I can parry back while still applying poke pressure and then having my burst heals for my all-in characters, either Junker Queen or Reaper. And we just kind of never give the hit scan Mercy combo anything to lock down for an extended period of time. Even when they do get a pick, it's like, what do you do next? Do you fight around a corner? No, Wuyang does, so he wins. It seems because Wuyang is a bit more technical of a hero, less people are exploiting him to his full potential. To me, I think he's like even more broken than Juno was at release. Probably about as broken as Kiri, because just like her, he's a completely transformative support kit that on certain maps is just going to hard dominate. Like you can even be down a kill or two and still be able to swing a fight back. Like that just shouldn't happen. And part of the reason is because his base kit is so flexible on a map like this, but also because his ultimate can be used to be basically an extra life on a hard engaged character, or to be a dual threat for yourself against the hard engaged character. So whenever you get into that kind of situation where you're both good at helping what's good in the meta already, but countering it as well, that leads you to be a very effective character. And I'll say, over time, I've learned that I just go for his resource perks, because the more that I've discovered about the meta, there just isn't that much neutral fight dueling anyway. So even the empowered water damage doesn't impress me too much if I can get away with using the extra torrent anyway. Like if I think I'm going to be able to heal amp my tank or a death ball of teammates, a pure resource style is what I would go for, because a big percentage of your carry is just on the style of the character. You don't have to have good time to kill. You don't have to kill on this character. You just run away and then ult well and you're going to win. And if we just showed a hit scan pressure style being very difficult just because there isn't like a thing to pressure, the backline's hiding and then the flankers are all around you. Here's an example of Reaper, who I think is the biggest winner and beneficiary in the DPS department this season because he has a lot of great perk options. I like to always go for the heal orbs on perk 1, but even the pros have been toying around with the fast TP perk, which basically means your all-ins on the backline are even faster. But either way, due to his high health points, the high healing numbers in the game in general, on a lot of maps, Reaper is dominant. I would say this is the perfect type of map you want, where the hit scans see nothing until they step around a corner that you can camp. Reaper's got some incredibly easy kills on those heroes, and now it seems like even his major perk that either adds a ranged attack or more lifesteal after Wraith, which is going to really empower your Death Blossom, either one really, really strong. Because remember as well, he has cooldowns, even with Shadow Step maybe, to dodge an all-in style engage, but the Wraith form allows him to go in, then get fully out. I would say these are like some of the top performing heroes in the metagame. In my experience, seeing a weak hero on the field who's exploitable to Reaper rushing it down is one of the easiest ways to snowball an advantage, because keep in mind, we're not just talking about Reaper having a snowball perk where he gets extra life when getting an elimination, or maybe he just has fast TP, which gets him in the first time, but might get him in again. So really early on, he's putting the gas pedal down. But there's also Genji often alongside him, who with melee hits gets more swift strikes. So a bit of the problem is some of the top meta heroes, they just keep going. Like they go in, all in, and they can go again, like right away. So not only would it be hard to pressure, you're just going to get picked because the flankers are pretty well positioned in the type of neutral we have right now. And even better with advantage state, because they can chase down the rest of the kills pretty easily once you get that advantage. But I would be careful up against a Reaper right now. We'll talk about ways to crowd control him away from your backline later. Wuyang at least can dodge and parry away, but that's limited as well. But a lot of the weaker heroes in the meta right now are feasted on by Reaper, so be careful even slippery supports like Moira or Juno, just due to how deep Reaper can go with his much more flexible full perk kit, being effective at range, but just having more options to counter whatever else your team is running. You don't want to be the weak link in this meta at all. Otherwise, some of the stronger, easier heroes are just going to run at you, and you're going to expect your team to peel for you to have any chance at all. And it's just better to be on something that creates space for the team and isn't easily targetable yourself. Now, as you guys know, I've tried to make a lot more guides in Overwatch 2 recently, but earlier years, it was harder for me to understand where the game could be going long term, because this entire guide today flips on its head on the next major, not just hero edition, but whatever perk philosophy they go with long term. Like, they might start to learn, well, if we power creep all of the perks at the same time, this is the effect we get. We get season 18. So we're going to expect that there's going to be times where the perks are at like a much lower power level. Possibly, like if people get sick of the perk power creep, or if they do like a widespread nerf across the cast. We've seen every kind of meta in Overwatch 2 that you can imagine. Sniper dominant, flanker dominant, backline dominant, tank dominant. This one is kind of a weird all-in brawly style, kind of around the Wuyang theme. So if we look for him to get nerfed in the future, or for the perk power to go down, then the neutral fight impact will go up, which basically means to say, like, if you play Cassidy right now, you're all in on that mag nade getting value, and if the Reaper dodges it, well, he's stronger in every other respect for the rest of the game. He's life-stealing, he'll get health packs essentially when he gets kills, or just like hard W's in. While in some respects, the snipers in season 18 do have sick perks. Hanzo's like the only one that I find kind of playable, just for the severe upside, and he can be flexible and spam. But overall, anything that can be targeted is just hard to play right now, which is why these flankers that have escapes are kind of the baseline part of the game. It could change if Sojourn's health goes back up, or if the perk balance changes significantly. Essentially, characters that get in position, if everyone gets like a boost to their tools, right? Characters that get into position better are just going to be more suited to do that. The crazy high upside, low mobility characters just aren't that worth it right now. Sojourn, Ashe, Cassidy especially, at least from a solo queue perspective. Unless you start picking some of the crucial counter meta heroes that we're going to talk about for the rest of the video. The first iteration of the perks meta, I thought Pharah had some of the strongest perks. That's since been retuned down. There's different winners now. Overall, all of the tanks are a lot stronger, but due to the very different team compositions, there's not necessarily one meta tank that works always, but there is the general theme that you're probably going to have a bit of a better time if you either can go all in or survive one. So you have to be careful playing characters like Juno, Soldier, or Ramatra, who really get their value over time. And it's much easier to play tanks like Hazard, Doomfist, Mauga, Wrecking Ball, or even Reinhardt. The flankers have won the perk battle this season. I haven't even mentioned Tracers yet, and hers might be some of the most ridiculous. But also with their mobility, they can actually dodge. That's another problem with the meta right now to understand. Everything's power crept, but the result of that is that tanks are very durable on the front line. If you try to play a pressure style character to go at the tank, you're probably going to get poked out or targeted anyway, or they're just going to get healed because the support's power creep healing has also gone up with the perks. If going all in is sort of what's dictating the meta for the tanks and damage, then the supports just having raw healing stat output overall across the board going up is the other thing to expect, which means just pressuring from the front line is difficult for those two reasons. Okay, so that's the theme of entire season 18. Now it's time for me to pull out some counter meta strategies that I've been seeing get some use, and I want to discuss why that's the case. So Mei is a character that I have hardly ever played in Overwatch 2. I have 9 hours on her, which is ridiculous. As now, after leaning on her to survive playing damage to get my top 500 combined, she is nearly a 4K rated hero on my roster, which is crazy to me because I only have that level of mastery on a few characters, Ramatra, Mauga, and probably Junkrat if he was any good this meta, but he's not. And I think that goes to show just how strong Mei can be. And the reason is, due to the state of the meta as we've discussed it so far, medium range damage is just not really worth that much because the characters attached to it are likely going to get targeted or have a really hard time in the neutral fight. Then on top of that anyway, the premise of what they do is just a bit weak because the tanks are so sustainable either with their own cooldowns or the Giga support healing. So what's the point of playing that way to pressure the front line? Well, Mei has always had a bit more value value in her wall, crowd control, and her own durability. So while she doesn't necessarily go all in herself, she's one of the few backliner style characters that's going to get a lot of value because she can survive an all in and has a ton of cool interactions in the ult fight. I got a really satisfying full hold here on Midtown up against the enemy's ult engages, where they're playing a lot of these medium range characters and they can't ever really set up their ults to find anything. Either to hide in my icicle in order to protect myself or to lane off the engagement. Just adding to focus fire or dodging an ult is incredible value, and that's what you want to look to do when setting up Mei. Not to just go all in on the tank aggressively, but to manipulate the battle slowly. It's a very long, sustain over time style of play. Surviving, poking, crowd controlling, and trying to divide and conquer, then working up to your ultimate, which is a pseudo-defensive ult in some respects, especially since there's a lot of all-in characters that are very good. While I don't really rate the healing in Blizzard necessarily, which makes it an even more pseudo-defensive ult, the fact that you get any move speed at all up against these hard engaged characters, whether it be Nanoblade or the tank coming in at you, and you can manipulate that fight with a wall and the Blizzard, that's very, very good right now. And while Mei does have the downside of not being as strong against other better poke characters, like let's say I think Hanzo's one of the easier, more reliable poke characters right now, because although he can be hit or miss, you don't necessarily need sustained damage right now. You got to be able to get a pick or fully get out. Mei's got more health, so she can tend to tank while playing this kind of position. And mastering the projectile, you're going to have a surprisingly decent time up against a lot of the hit scans who, again, you don't necessarily have to kill because your tank line is probably going to survive most of their pressure damage anyway. You just have to play to interact with the ult fight for the most part. It's long been the case that Mei has been sort of like the Mei Kree counterpart. Back when he was called that. Now he's Cassidy, of course. McCassidy. Like the two of them have crowd control and are midliner style DPS. Cass is a little bit harder to play and just a little less relevant because he's a little harder to keep alive against all ins, though he has much better damage. All right, so that Midtown game, the previous clip, I don't think it is as impressive as this one. On Midtown, it's a tight map, narrow chokes. If they cast Nano on their tank and he looks to run in, I just wall him off. You can see the value there, right? Just hold wall to manipulate the ult engage. The other aspect I would say about wall is just using it as a pseudo Rhine shield, as in, when the enemy are playing those backline characters, you just shut them off by putting a wall in their face, not to necessarily go right at the tank, but just to reduce the amount of line of sight that the enemy backline has, if they are playing a backline character. In this kind of power creep meta where everything's more sustainable, that kind of play matters more. Like if we would imagine that Widow was the best character in the game, it kind of doesn't matter if you wall her off, she'll just grapple and then get a pick, and maybe that's the only defining feature of the metagame. That's not what we're dealing with, right? We're dealing with a power creep version of Overwatch. So everybody's got huge cooldowns, multiple stacking almost stadium-esque effects, and a huge ultimate. And then even more so, this Flashpoint game is the type of map I might be scared to play Mei on, but it just goes to show how holding your icicle cooldown really allows you to play a backliner in a meta that otherwise you're just going to get targeted and die trying to play that style. Especially with the rework to New Junk City, it is a close quarter enough map. I mean, they did open up some of the sections a bit, but we're going to see me really lure in and counter the all-in nature of the enemy here, particularly when I work up to my ultimate. And by living, poking, healing yourself, surviving, a lot of the rest of the meta is going to be doing that anyway. And a big percentage of the relevant fights are the ult fights. So if you're able to counter a hard engage into your backline, especially using the Mei Blizzard perk that allows your team to move faster and get a bit of healing, not really a defensive ult worth of healing, but enough to outposition the enemy, even with slow backliner characters. I mean, it's another speed amp version now in Blizzard, especially since this season, the enemy nano boost is probably going to have a speed boost attached to it. But Mei has a beam attack, so that means she can go through Genji's Reflect, who otherwise is one of the top characters in the meta right now. The enemy tank is going to be going Reinhardt here, but he might as well have been any of the meta variant takes. Like, I think this would have been a good matchup against a Wrecking Ball Mauga. Maybe a little bit less of Doom, but some playability there. Basically, if you're going to expect them to hard engage into your back and you can wall and Blizzard to manipulate it, that is incredibly free focus fire for you. And honestly, I find Ana to be a bit difficult to play this meta because there is so many aggro characters in it. But the value of Ana is immense if she has the proper supporting cast around her, playing in her line of sight and setting her up. I mean, that's kind of always the case, right? But you can't have everybody going aggro with nobody to defend her. Because remember, Ana's one of the few characters that has insane neutral fight value, because her cooldowns land and like get a kill. Very few supports can do that. But Ana herself is a sniper class, so she could be overwhelmed pretty easily too. What this enemy Ryan would need to do is play a little bit more like I advocate for in the big tank guide, where Ryan's actually the first character, like shielding your team in up against the Mei and using his pin to dodge away from the blizzard as opposed to diving into it. Then he could still be pretty playable here. And even gum up the Junker Queen comp, but Queen and Mei are just like great characters to really punish any aggression that comes in haphazardly. We're making it look simple out here in this game because, well, the enemy's just playing too up-tempo and aggro, not really reading how they're supposed to path in. And frankly, that's often the case in most Overwatch games. Because remember, because it's a very power creep style meta, that makes it a teamwork meta. Everything's pretty self-sufficient on its own, because if we're saying characters like Mei and Reaper are really good, well, it's not a solo carry meta. So as long as your team isn't the one making a mistake, whether I've got Queen here or Hazard or Doomfist or whoever, setting up the offense of my tank with Focus Fire is gonna make things go really easy. Also, I think importantly here, the enemy supports just aren't that strong of characters. Like, their comp just kind of doesn't function. Moira's a rush character, but unless she runs over the Ana, she'll get outvalued there. Mercy is incredibly middling this meta, and even if you give her like a meta-approved ideal pocket target, it too likely gets overwhelmed with Focus Fire or just outvalued by an all-in because Mercy doesn't have a way to interact with that. So this Mei game, it's a blowout, but the enemy isn't running some of the best heroes in the game, and neither is my team, frankly. The thing that I've really noticed playing Season 18 a lot is that everybody's kind of adapted to the wave respawn mechanic in a bad way as well. Like, it's good to go in, commit, get the wave respawn. It's bad in that I now feel like everybody's got W-itis, as in it's like players don't tend to look like they're trying to scout the enemy's setup and then make a really intelligent pathing decision. Oftentimes the tank is to blame for this the most, I'd say. Like, hold the hand of your teammate, look to see where the enemy's at, and decide, like, am I gonna get walled off if I go this way? Will I get focus fired? Who are you trying to set up in your team fight? I think you get rewarded by running at things so much that when that stops working, players just sort of fall over, and they might not know why they're getting blown out, but that's a big reason right there. There's a thoughtful exchange of brawl cooldowns that you have to get out before you actually commit. I was so proud of my team on the way that we cleared space carefully. We're playing Wuyang Zen and a Roadhog. Double hit scan. I think a lot of these characters aren't that hard to counter right now. We have very low healing, but look at my team take cover after a little bit of poke. Go inch by inch. We set up our backline, and once the Zen, or that could be an Ana in this case, both great neutral fight offense, you carefully walk in, covering each other's angles, get that into position, then you push W. Maybe they did it on accident here, I don't know. But so many times in that previous game, the enemy Ryan was just in before his supports, and then on top of that, his supports had low neutral anyway. Moira, Mercy are just not neutral fight characters. They're like a spectator class of support. This is all important because so many of the years of Overwatch 2, the game was so much of a shooter. A lot of this kind of didn't matter. Like, it did matter, but you could just pick Sojourn or Tracer and frag, and it mattered far less. You'll get way more value now by reading the matchup, knowing what a greedy backliner is. Ana, Zen, Cassidy, the dive target threats are your entire team comp. That's how you have to think about it. You've got your cooldowns to sustain yourself, but if your Zen isn't set up, you don't have a comp. But then once he does get set up, well, then they'll let the bodies hit the floor because you got Discord Orb and everything will fall over in an instant. And that's because our backline is simply better, or at least in the way that we're playing it. Our community seems to not understand at all what the support lines even do. You can't just be a lone FPS character and carry. You really do need a team comp to function now. This enemy team kind of doesn't know what to pick. He goes from Junker Queen or Rhine, and they're on Lucio Kiri, which is a very stable, long-standing Overwatch 2 backline, but players tend to not know what to do with it. If both teams just square up, our Roadhog could kind of be anything. Sigma, Orisa, etc. Because we have Wuyang Zen, our backline poke firepower is immense. The enemy also has poke DPS. So if no one goes a Genji or a Reaper to flush things out, a lot of the game is just looking at the tank, and we're going to say, well, one tank countered the other, but that's not really what happened. We have a Zen who we protect. Lucio Kiri needs to get proactive. The Kiri's got to get angles, get flanks off, get damage in to make space. Same with the Lucio in a way, but maybe get boops. Not getting a boop kill on Li Jiang, it's like, what are you picking Lucio for? Whereas you can expect Wuyang Zen to auto win once you set it up and it has position. A lot of these clips in this video that I'm winning the hardest, it's when the enemy backline and tank doesn't really create a comp. But the DPS picks matter a lot too. You can overcome some of this by leaning into what your comp does. By the enemy only having 2 poke DPS and not a high risk one, like a Genji or Reaper who's gonna go all in, they sort of just poke at us. Our team uses cover. Yes, the hog gets pressured, and that DPS passive does add up. Because my team uses cover well, we self-heal and utilize our low amount of healing, and hog just vapes to survive. A lot of Season 18 feels this way. Their comp can't clear space into ours. They've got the wrong characters. Some swaps that would help is a Reaper or Genji on the DPS line. Their own Ana pick could make some carry impact on the front line, because ultimately a passive Lucio Kiri backline is no more impact than a Mercy Moira one. Someone's got to take a risk to make an impact somewhere, and these survivable characters just aren't cutting it in Season 18, unless you're using them for a means to an end. One last damage character for you. Sombra in this position is set up perfectly similar to the Reaper on Lighthouse. Once again, the enemy's got a low ground brawl tank and low ground hit scan DPS, and will never let them get an angle. At least for me, I haven't been seeing Sombra get banned nearly as much. And I will say to be careful, because the healing numbers are so high, isolating one thing on its own isn't really what you're going to expect to do a lot of the time. Her perks are okay, but the reasons I would pick her over Mei or Reaper right now is just for the verticality. Or in those cases where there's vertical heroes that you can't disable, like against Doom, I said earlier, Sombra can get to him and hack him out of his block. But even up here, you can just see how the drop engages utterly shuts out this enemy team, and they're suffering from W-itis. The meta characters are the flankers. So the Rhine Shield does nothing. We just flank around it, pick apart the backline, fight whatever we want. And while I think with the perk power creep, Sombra probably isn't going to do a lot of things one-on-one, it's gonna be pretty hard to play that all-in style. You're gonna have an easier time playing the upgraded Reaper or maybe Venture. But certainly what you can do is use teamwork as Sombra, because if you disable something in a power creep style meta, and we've seen this like in, there was a Sombra version of Goats for a while in Overwatch 1. For the same reason, if you're disabling the kits of the enemy, that'll help your focus fire again. Not as easy as the Mei, I think, but certainly a lot of the same principles apply. And since I think the Mei super jump perk is a joke, if you need to get vertical, I would go Sombra. There's a few key tips for her. When you go invis, there's a timer on how long you are invis, and if you wait for its full duration, there'll be a minimum amount of time for you to be able to translocate again. Use that to set up your flanks to do a pounce attack, cast your hack and virus, and then get out of there. If you try to attack too early, you're not going to have your translocator back in time, and that's where you really can be punished. And also as well, the virus is going to be a lot easier to hit if you kind of pickpocket somebody and really jam it in their face. Since so much of the game is about fighting on your terms, even though I think her stats don't necessarily look that impressive, Sombra being able to do that and dictate engages and pick something out that's out of position, the information game goes a long way, because there's so many other characters that are strong in their own right. Like if the enemy loses some defenses due to hack or EMP, well, your tank's got some giga busted perk that makes them do more damage now. So the likelihood that you playing well with your teammate converts with a kill is really high right now. The key tip, of course, is to look where your team is fighting and try to create man advantage scenarios. It's less about what you're fighting and how many of you are fighting it, because you can hack anything and team up on it and get an elimination. On this Route 66 game, me and my team had a very efficient attack. And I think in other metas, you would have seen like Mei Sombra and be really worried about your damage output. But again, everything's about focus fire right now, so that really doesn't matter so much. Start working the perimeter on A. We're going to deep flank with invis, only pop out once the invis timer is nearly gone. Protect a pack, maybe we'll hack it so that we can use it again, but more importantly, it's just the position and the crossfire position we're trying to make. keep cycling that over and over again, you're really going to take the attack into your hands because the enemy's not going to know where your invis attack is coming from. And then boom, before you know it, you've overwhelmed something, be it the front line or the back line. Just keep in mind that Sombra's attack kind of drains down to 0 if you miss your viruses. So get up close and personal to guarantee you can hit them, but also don't put them in the tank too much because a smart tank player will just let you hit them with it repeatedly and just get healed. The virus on the tank only works if they're going aggressive and overextending, but if they're properly tanking it and anchoring their position, don't waste your time working them down just because they're a free target. Ideally, you want to be making reads on who you can overwhelm with the damage of your team. It's a very like commander style of play. And certainly I notice there's just so many hit scan players, and I don't know exactly why. Like hit scan's been good for a while, but having 2 hit scans, a lot of this video, it just is like certain death at this current season. Having any flanker at all, but Sombra as well, because she has opportunists to flush something out when it's low, snowballs an advantage really quickly. And then by the time we get into C, the virus spreading perk is one of my favorite in the season, I think. So whether you manually hack or in this case, use your EMP and hit the virus, remember you can come out of stealth and line that shot up to be an easy follow-up. A big AoE attack, which is important because there's just so much healing, right? We get a 15 streak here on the attack. This Route 66 game at the scoreboard, you might think was close. But considering on our defense, we held on C, and their defense, I don't think even won a fight. I mean, that's a blowout game if I've ever seen one. Now, we might neglect to talk about tanks in this video. We did make big, longer videos talking about the entire tank meta right now. Because the tanks have mechanics to interact with each other, as well as so many things get played, whether you're against an all-in style comp or not, that's really going to change how you play tank. But we can, for the purposes of a counter meta video today, talk about the support lineup because the supports really modify your team comp to a large extent, and it's probably the most misunderstood and misutilized part of Overwatch 2 strategy from the community. We're going to look at 3 different supports, but all have kind of a similar premise. Here's a game of Esperanza where in my meta video, I showed off that Kiri and Wuyang is kind of the super-powered backline that'll really lean into the all-in style meta. They both get their angles, are able to dodge, duel for themselves, and apply a lot of pressure. If you get that to work, it can be good. But the problem is, in this meta, if you have a teammate who is a weak link, whether that be a Pharah, Sojourn, Bastion, whatever, and they get targeted by a more meta character like Genji farming a Bastion, it can be very difficult to function because that guy's going to get targeted easily, run over, and die. Playing the wrong damage hero right now is the most detrimental option, even more so, I think, than having the wrong tank, because most of the tanks can be somewhat self-sufficient, but a damage that isn't perfectly set up for the situation likely is going to get run down by some of the giga-juiced meta characters. So not only is Genji just good against most things, he's great against Bastion, even with Bastion's perk improvements as well as smaller hitbox. So because of that, it's going to be brutally inefficient for me to try to heal him as Kiri, so I swapped to Baptiste. And for the rest of this game, we have a really easy time because we just square up and play Overwatch fundamentals. And these 3 characters in the support role do this really well right now. Underrated for sure. Baptiste, Iliari, and Brigitte, all of them just have a lot of healing output and hold their position really well. For whatever reason, we have way more Juno, Mercy, Moira players, but the stat output of all of them is just significantly lower. And the reason why I'm not a huge fan of them right now is because they're not that effective at going all in. Hard engages on you, you're a little bit screwed, whereas Bap, Ilari, and Brigitte all stand a fighting chance due to their cooldowns protecting them, but also them having offense that's significant. It's not as high as the offense of Kiri and Wuyang, but if your team is set up to need healing, like they're still good heroes to play with the standard Overwatch cast that most people play. If your teammates are picking off-meta heroes, the ones that we kind of tried to tell you not to pick earlier at the start of this video, you kind of have to lean into their style in order to make it effective. And then you can get it to work. But if you try to make a mix of a team comp right now in Season 18, you'll get brutalized. So many times have I seen like a Torbjorn comp be one Reaper swap away from being functional. This is the kind of meta where you're kind of only as strong as your weakest link. and characters that just kind of hang around in the comp and hope to pressure for value eventually just ain't it. Really hard to play. Even my best hero on the entire game, Ramatra, I start to struggle with because really what he needs to do is find impact against some of these aggressive plays really quickly, and it's just not the slow style I tend to like to play with him. And you're almost just better off having something that's got harsher weaknesses but less all-around strengths, but at least one big play that they can make. That's kind of what you need to do in a power creep version of Season 18. Back to talking about supports now. I think some of this will change as more players learn some of these other characters. Like, Kiri has been one of the strongest staple supports in the game forever, yet has a negative win rate because she's just hard to play the way you need to play her. And that is, if you play her as a backliner, you will outright get outvalued by an actual backliner like Baptiste. That's the long and short of it. Kiri is a playmaker, and you kind of have to be taping down W and pressing your limits to function as the character at all. And that's why high-level players have a much higher win rate on Kiri, but if you just play her safe to live, that is just nowhere close to good enough. When these other supports are just spitting out value without needing to hit a shot, and Kiri is a situational, contextual playmaker, hitting and landing Suzus at the right time or headshots, it's just hard sometimes to do that, especially if you're going up against some of the top meta characters like Genji and Reaper. But more importantly, if you have a teammate who's getting farmed by them and you need to somehow edge that matchup in your favor. Now, speaking of, I would say everyone needs to learn Brig. I can't believe the game's been out this long and we still don't play Brig, but we play Mercy, Juno, and Moira. And I think the reason is the player base sometimes doesn't know the basic cooldown cycle, which is kind of a pretty high skill floor, actually. Like, if you don't do this cooldown cycle appropriately, a lot of things that can kill you, but if you do learn it, then you can dominate a lot of characters that otherwise would run over your backline. And that is to walk in with your shield, flail the target that otherwise would engage on you, especially if it's a tank using their mobility cooldown. That's amazing value. Or the Reaper hard engages onto you, the Genji starts to engage on you. You can't miss the flail, otherwise you're just dead. But you hit it, you create some space, activate the Inspire, and keep in mind you're probably going to get the Inspire last longer on flail hit perk. That creates some distance on its own, but if you need to create even more distance, then you shield bash away. You keep that cycle going, and that makes space on the battlefield, keeping those close range all-in characters away from you, slowly creating value over time. Like, Brig is a value turret. I think a lot of people play her just to brawl. You just W at something and hope to swing to victory, but that's not really what she does. Now, one caveat that I'll say about Brig and Bap, in this meta, I don't love their ultimates, which is why I would consider them counter meta strategies. Like, Wuyang's ult is perfect. While it will take some learning and some players try to use it like a standard defensive ult when it's not really for that, it's for hard engages, either to counter the enemies when the flanker is right on you or on your tank or hard engaged character themselves, so they get to go all in. If you whiff on that and don't hit the stun, it's not very good. But in general, like, these other ults just look like cupcake ults compared to that one when it's actualized. And that does create a bit of a problem for you where Brig's ult, it's a bit skillful and you have to hit it and time it, because realistically the armor health alone is not going to be enough to really withstand a lot of the other ults and power creep in the game. So it's all about keeping that Inspire active and actually winning a duel probably. And Baptiste equally, window, really hard to get value on because a lot of the fights aren't set up to have a prolonged poke exchange with things either running past you or just like jumping on you as you attempt to use it. That makes it a little difficult. If you've been paying attention to the themes of the video, you might imagine why Brig is so good and such a good counter meta pick, because if there's a ton of value in denying ults and hard engaging, well, Brig, if she can survive against that, there's a huge swing value going on. Flailing away the Wuyang ult at any point might offset the fact that his ult is better than yours in theory. Like, if you can outplay it or shield it yourself, then you've got a robust, brawly support character. And the problem with Brig is, like, her stats are insanely high, but if she misses her mechanic or makes a mistake, she easily gets overwhelmed. That's the issue. That's, I think, why some people rather play Mercy or Moira, because you fly in the sky, that's really obvious how you dodge, or Moira gets the get out of jail free card. Everything with Brig is earned. You play like a tank that can get one hit killed, essentially. And so you have to cycle your cooldowns even more carefully than a tank would. But once you do that, you can surely be a force to be reckoned with against a lot of the top characters of the game, considering many of them want to close the distance. So you controlling that distance control battle over time is going to get a lot of value in your hands. But Illari is a different case altogether. Probably the most criminally underrated support in the game. I don't know why players seemingly don't know that if you camp and protect a safeguarded turret position, your team can be like immortal. The healing turret is incredibly easy to get value on, obnoxious as hell for the enemy team, especially if it's hit around a corner. And they buffed her beam somewhat recently, so it has farther range. So the stats you get on just healing alone from Illari is nuts. And I tend to think of her of kind of a poke version of Brigitte. So in the same way that you kind of use Brig to create spacing on the enemy team, Illari's low-key got the best boop on the support category. I guess Lucio's is technically better, but it requires you to wall ride to use it, whereas, or at least to like set it up and use it effectively. Whereas Illari can just kind of passively hold her angle and poke away. And considering there are so many things that just want to dive right on you this meta, this allows you to play that poke style while actually having a mobility escape that creates distance. I'm liking her as well now because on top of that, you fly in her ultimate, which while in some cases might be a detriment because you don't want to get hit scanned out of the sky, we kind of were saying earlier that hit scans are pretty hard to play right now. So it's unlikely that the enemy is going to have a lot of hit scan pressure themselves. So with that being the case, these things that hard dive on you, you can use the Illari ult to both be defensive with your mobility positioning to dodge a hard engage, but then also considering the Wuyang ult's defenses are quite low, in that exchange, then you can dodge, parry, and then have an offensive attack with the Illari explosion ults onto the squishies. That is a pretty nuts transfer, and considering Wuyang struggles to fire at flying targets, that's an aspect of Illari that I just think is completely underutilized right now. Because simply think about it, the character with the Wuyang ult, it channels up for some time. It might even be so telegraphed that the enemy casts it on their teammate, then they dive in. You still have got your outburst to jump away, but then you can fly away. That creates a really big swing play. And for me, just like we talked about with Mei, having these big swings in the ult exchange should be your priority this kind of meta, because you should sort of just have your bunkered down positioning and healing to do the heavy lifting on the neutral fight. Your tank lives forever, your supports are giga juiced. The neutral really shouldn't be what you're struggling with. And then, but with the combination of like these three characters, and of course, like, you know, Wuyang and Kiri can do the job for the rest of the meta. We talked about that in the first full meta video. But then you add these three to your arsenal, and then you're enabling your poke if your team is crazy enough to try to play them, or really interacting with some of the top heroes in the game right now. So there you go. Mostly support and damage were talked about today, but considering they all can interact with some of the top contending characters in the game right now, I think you're going to have a strong meta counterpunch if you decide to try to step out of what the easiest characters to play right now are, or if your team's doing that and you're looking to enable what they're trying to do. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it a like, and hey, I have reviewed all of the submissions that you've sent into the Google form for Season 18 VOD reviews, or just to share something with me. I don't know when they're going to patch the game again, but you can still submit to the same link. I'll try to remember to put it in the description. We'll have more analytical breakdowns using your gameplay in upcoming videos. I got a whole bunch of videos lined up to work on now. If you enjoyed this one, though, leave it with a like, and don't forget to click subscribe and the bell icon to actually get notified when my videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito. I'll see you guys next time.